Hi, how are you?
How are you? All good?
All good, all good. Cool.
And
So yeah, we have Andres here. I was just wondering how many students we're expecting, and then accordingly we can plan. Yeah, when to get started.
from CCC Lebanon, we're expecting around 20
Okay,
students. Yeah.
nice. Cool. Cool. So I think we'll wait 2 minutes, and then I think we'll start after that.
Right. No
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. Okay, so I think we can get started. Um, so hi guys. My name is Yash, and I'm very happy that we're having this webinar. I'm the co-founder of Rise. We're a company that helps students like yourselves do research. And yeah, we have hundreds of top mentors like Andres from some of the top universities in the world. Along with those mentors, we basically help students conduct research. And yeah, so this is my co-founder. We decided to start Rise because we saw a gap in education, and we decided that it's something that we want to fill with one-on-one mentorship. So just some examples of our students who have conducted research. I think, for example, we have Nivan. He conducted research in math and music and managed to publish in the IJFMR. Um, Similarly, we have students who conduct research in many different things, many different subjects, whatever interests them. For example, if you were interested in law, then you would probably be paired up with Andres, and then Andres would help you uh, conduct research. So it depends on what research you are looking to do, and then we pair you up with the mentors accordingly. So a little bit about us. We have 250 plus students from some of the best universities in the world. And yeah, as you can read, 3,000 plus students, 40 countries represented, and we have some research publications in international journals and conferences. So if you're interested, I'll put some details in the chat, and then if anyone's interested, they can choose to sign up as well. And it is a paid program, unfortunately. Uh, we have a $2,000 fee for our program, and it's an 8-week program. I'll put some details in the chat. I won't take any more time, and I think Andres can take over and tell you more about the webinar. So handing over to you, Andres. Maybe you can introduce yourself as well. Yeah.
Sure. Well, so hi everyone. As Yash mentioned, I'm Andres. I'm from originally from Colombia, and right now I'm pursuing it's like a PhD program for foreign lawyers at Stanford. Um, and I'm basically starting the fifth year of my program. And before coming to Stanford or before starting my program at Stanford, I completed like a bachelor's in law in Colombia and also a bachelor's in economics. Um, so basically, precisely because of my background, that's why I decided to come to Stanford and start and apply to Stanford and I start this program. And I wanna give you like a little bit more details about my very basically like my experience to in case so that you can understand a little bit better the things that I've decided to do here at Stanford. Um, Basically, because of my joint degree in law and economics, my goal was to find like a niche where I could apply my legal and economic like training. So when I was in Colombia, I wanted to be like the lawyer that actually understood economics and that could use economics to make decisions in like a specific field, which is like antitrust. If you're not familiar with what antitrust is basically like related to making decisions in regarding how companies compete in like in markets that are, I would say, like characterized by like free markets or like free competition. And basically in my specific case, what I've been doing at Stanford is using like economic tools, like one specific economic tool that is expected or is supposed to allow uh, is supposed to be used like as an input to make for making like legal decisions in the field of antitrust. So that's my core research. But in addition to that research, I have also precisely because of my or because of being at Stanford, I also decided to start taking like coding courses and machine learning courses because I believe that um, it made a lot of sense to learn machine learning if you are a Stanford student, and also because I believe there was like an opportunity for providing or improving access to legal services through the use of AI. So basically, those two things are like are my like the core of the or characterize like the core of the subjects that I've been studying here. And so yeah, so that's my introduction. So now we'll start delving into how I've done research, which is yeah. So basically, from my perspective, when like the decision why I decided to start this program, and basically when you start like a PhD program, I feel like you wanna do research, and in some sense, in my specific case, I wanted to be a professor. I was a professor in Colombia for a few years before starting my program at Stanford, and 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 the specific research question that I wanted to like analyze or that I wanted to answer through the research that I'm conducting here at Stanford is related to specifically like how using economic tools can and like more robust economic tools that are like quantitative could improve the way authorities make market decisions. So that was like basically in other words, what the reason why I decided to start doing research was in my specific case because I had like a very specific question. So, for example, if you, I don't, I know so, like most of you or all of you are students, and I understand that your goal is to apply to a university. So I believe that if you're like you want to use like the research projects that you will be developing to improve like your chances of getting or being admitted at some good universities wherever you guys are. So basically what I believe is like you should find like or at least again this is what worked in my case. I found like a research question that I was passionate about answering like this specific question. I thought or I think it made a lot of sense from my perspective to learn like that specific method or to try to become an expert in this specific field. So that's why I decided to spend like all this time trying to become an expert in using economic tools for answering like legal or to be like to use those the results of using those methods in the to make decisions in the legal field, precise specifically in the related to antitrust. So basically, when you want to do research, I would suggest that you have like you should identify like a specific topic, and after, because you are very young, and unless you already have like a specific topic and you're already very familiarized with it, what I would suggest is like that you identify a topic that you enjoy, because we will be working on it probably like for even at least for a few months, and maybe those research ideas that you start pursuing, like even when you're like very young, might have like an impact like in the long run. So I would suggest like finding something that you think you're gonna enjoy and you would like to work like for some time, and after finding like those specific or that is or like a few specific topics, I feel like one of the best options is to usually, like, the goal of doing research is basically to helping or to um like improving what, like, in general, like, I would say like humans as a whole, like, our knowledge about like a specific topic. So when you're doing research, you should or you must be aware of the like what other people have researched in that specific field, so that you can basically try to build on like the research that was conducted by other that had been conducted by other people before. So one thing I would suggest is, after you find like a specific topic, you should start looking for you should start like narrowing a little bit your question, because usually, and that I think that happened to me too. Basically, when the first time I wanted to do research, I had like a very broad research question, and if your research question is like extremely broad, it's going to be like extremely hard to actually determine as precisely um, like what is specifically are you trying to what is like the specific thing that you're trying to address or to answer. So one thing I would do is like, and for narrowing your research question, I feel like one option is to basically start looking for research papers, like papers that have been published, uh, like the more recent, the better, so that you can basically get a sense of what is being researched lately in like the field that interests any of you. And usually, of course, those papers um, are expected to have done the same thing that we are discussing here. So basically, if you check like their literature, they should have like a list of what are the what was the research that was done that is related to that specific paper, and that was done by other researchers, or even by the same researcher or group of researchers in the past. So again, one thing I would do if you want to do research is basically find the topic, try to find research articles that were published in like academic journals. Once you find like those articles, uh, I usually like I would start with the most recent articles, again, because they might give you like an idea of what is like the state of the art in your specific field. That doesn't mean that other articles that might be older could even be more important for that specific field, because maybe they were able to create, or maybe because some of those articles developed like new methods or applied methods using, like, for example, like data that hadn't been used in the past, or probably like for many different reasons. But again, one thing I would do is to get like an idea of like the state of the art in that specific field, is to find the topic, it's like very like interesting, like from like a personal perspective, and start like researching like the literature like regarding that, like the general topic that you identified initially. And yeah, so that should allow you to narrow your research question. Something I feel like happens like very that can happen like very frequently is like, even if you like your I feel like your research is gonna, depending on how much like how ambitious you are and like the type of, if you're like doing research for as part, for example, as for example, in my case, in the case of my, for example, my PhD program, you might start with a different, you might start with a general idea, then you start narrowing your research question, and after like a few months, or like after learning more about your research, you might have to modify or adjust your research question, because it's like an ongoing process where you will always be learning like new things about the like about the, you will always be learning. So it doesn't, it's like that's, I feel like normal, that's normal to experience, like, or to be like in a situation where after having done research like for some time, you realize that you still need to, and after having narrowed your research question, like at least initially, you'll still have to basically like continue adjusting your research question, because you realize that they're like basically, for example, like the question that you wanted to analyze initially had already been has already been addressed by other people before, and maybe you, it's gonna be like extremely hard, or it doesn't make any sense for you to basically try to to address that same question again. Could you yeah, so after identifying the question you want to address, what I would suggest, or basically what you want to do is determine like the research methods that you want to use, or that you want to use to answer that question. So it depends on, to some extent, I guess it depends on uh, two things. Basically, what are your preference, what is like your background, and what are your preferences in terms of um, like what are the tools that you want to learn. So for example, and one thing, if you have any questions, you can I don't know if they can ask questions directly, or if they have to text, if they have to use the chat. Kushi.
Yes, I think they should be able to unmute themselves. Can one of you please confirm if you're able to unmute yourself? Anyone?
I can.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
No
Cool,
worries.
thank you. Well, so basically, so for example, in my case, because of my background in law and economics, I knew that the method that I wanted to use to answer my question, and there are basically like two things. Like if you once you identify your question, like the question you want to address, um, I guess you should take into account like the type of methods that you want to learn, or that you want to use to to answer the question, your research question. But at the same time, um, I wouldn't say, it's like basically they're like the specific methods that are better suited for answering like a specific question. So basically, that's something that you should take into account. So for
Okay.
example, yep, I think someone was saying something. Well, I'll just continue. So basically, for example, in my case, because of my uh, legal and my economic training, I decided to use like quantitative methods, basically like economic methods, to answer like my specific legal question. So what I would say is, and also because in the long, this is a like a suggestion, is like depending on how hard the method is, you should basically like make a decision in terms of if you will probably be investing like a lot of time trying to learn that method. So it's like uh, I would suggest that once you then identify your research question, and if you have like a set of possible methods to use to answer that question, you should try to like basic when you choose which methods you want to use, you should take into account how hard they are in terms of if basically like your background fits, if you're like, if you already know how to use those methods, if you don't know how to use them, how much effort would you need to actually learn how to use them? And also, if it makes, I feel like this is important, if it makes sense to actually learn those methods in the long term, because, for example, there might be cases where you decide to learn something, like it's in this case, like a specific research method. In my case, for example, like a quantitative research method that implied learning like probability, statistics, linear algebra, coding, and then maybe you might find out that the method is not as useful as you thought it was be. So basically, and that might have like an impact in terms of basically you could have used that time more um, like efficiently, I would say. So, and well, so I don't know if anyone has any question so far. Well, usually they're like, at least from my perspective, because I'm a lawyer, but I usually do my I would I would not characterize my research as like traditional legal research, because I'm basically applying economic methods economic methods as part of my legal um, as part of my dissertation. But even in that case, um, there are usually like two types of like research methods, or you can characterize research methods like in two types. We usually like the and usually the two options are like quantitative research methods, which is basically what I'm mainly using for my research, or qualitative research methods, which is it's like they are different. I wouldn't say, I used to think honestly that quantitative methods were better than qualitative methods, because they are expected to be more precise, and you're using math, and like I used to think that like using like math and like all this basically these tools was more precise than like that the answers or the results you could get if you were just using like qualitative information. But I don't believe that's the case anymore. I think the basically the method, like the usefulness of the method is related to the type of question that you're trying to answer. So for example, there might be cases where using qualitative methods might be better for like the specific answer, for the specific research question that you're trying to address. Let's say I from my perspective, I think if your research is related to, is like it's focused on, or it's like it's framed like in the social sciences, it's pretty likely that it's much better for you to use like a qualitative method to answer like your research question. And usually like the qualitative methods are one option is, for example, like running interviews, or basically like either interviewing like experts in your field, like a few people that even though you're not interviewing like lots of like you won't have like lots of observations, you because you are interviewing like people that know a lot about your specific topic. You might not need to basically to reach out to too many people, because you are basically like taking advantage of some like fewer sources that are very like knowledgeable. That's one option. Another option might be, even when you're using like qualitative like even like some sort of combination between qualitative and quantitative. It's like you could run interviews or like surveys where you reach out to more people, depending on the type of research that you're trying to um, develop. And especially right now, I feel like I think this was like a few years ago, before AI and before machine learning and all the things that have been developed like recently. It was like it was not possible to automate um, like basically like the analysis of qualitative information, basically from like let's say I'm gonna try to explain this like in our words. So basically, when as lawyers, for example, in the case of my program or other people in my program, what I've seen it's like sometimes people they're doing qualitative research, and because of course they're trying to answer like their research question, they will have like they'll get like different feedback or different answers regarding their question, um, by like the different people or the different like people they survey to get like knowledge about the topic. So basically, you might one option that or one thing that people sometimes try to do is to or has to do is to basically try to see how they can add all that knowledge that they were able to assess or access, sorry. And sometimes that's hard because it's like and also it's like a subjective process. It's like in this specific case, because you're not using like numbers, this is qualitative. This is if you're using like qualitative method and you just have like text, it's hard to actually, you might have cases where for your specific question, you have like some people that might have like a specific opinion about it and others that think otherwise. So it's like you as a researcher, you'll have to see how you like compare and basically how what value you give to all those different sources of information and basically how you're gonna use them to to answer your question and how like basically how much value you're giving to each of them. So like again before like being able to use for example like machine learning or AI for this type for like processing like qualitative information, most people had to go through that process manually. So I would say that because you had to do it manually, that would mean that the process was more subjective. But even so, maybe if you use AI, you could say that you can automate the process, so it would be like more objective. And sometimes or most of the times when you're doing research, like your goal is to have like a research where it's like what researchers would describe as replicable, which is basically like if any person tries to answer the same research question, they should arrive at the same conclusion because it's basically it's like you're analyzing a topic and you're expecting to arrive at the truth regarding like the specific question that you're trying to address. And so that's basically like the case of like that's probably one of the, not like a limitation, but one of the things that you would have to determine how you're going to um, address if you're like using like a qualitative method. But again, that method is very useful depending on or that's those type of methods like surveys and like interviews are probably like are usually better suited for answering like a specific questions that cannot for which you cannot get access to like data that is like quantifiable. And in the other case, when you have access to quantitative, when you can use and it makes sense for you to use quantitative methods, basically, usually like the reasons are because you have data for the questions that you have like quantitative data for the questions that basically characterize the field or that might be useful for answering like your research question. And in addition to having access to that data, you have you have identified like some methods that are expected to be helpful for analyzing that specific data. So for example, in the case of, I don't know if have any of you taken like statistics courses, or there's there's like one method that is, or like I would say like a family of methods which is very like popular for doing like for trying to find like causal relationships between certain between like an independent variable and a dependent variable, and this is known as econometrics. I don't know if any of you have ever has any like training in statistics or maybe econometrics, but econometrics is usually like more advanced, so I would be surprised if any of you have like knows anything about this. No one? Well, so basically, if you're using statistics, I mean, if you want to use like a quantitative method, you will be the it's it's very likely that you're gonna be using like at least initially like statistics. And when you're using a statistics, I'm referring to, for example, one way to characterize like certain like data is to get like the average or like the standard deviation and see if those things are meaningful for answering like your research question. But those are, again, I mean, this is more like advanced because the goal of this webinar is not to talk about the specifics of, for example, like econometrics, but that's a just in case you want to research this topic like later. If you usually if you want to use if your research question implies like trying to determine if there's like a causal relationship between two phenomena, basically it's very likely that you'll have to use econometrics. So not even statistics, but econometrics, which is basically has like lots of different, it's like a field where researchers have developed like lots of different methods that would allow you or are expected to allow you to determine if there's like a causal relationship between two phenomena. And that's another option in terms of the method. And finally, I would, because of obviously AI is very popular right now. For example, in the case when you're using like quantitative methods, you could also characterize these methods like into groups. One group could be like a method like econometrics, where you're trying to see if there's like a causal relationship between two things, or the other option is like a method where you're trying to predict something, but you're not trying to determine if there's if you're not trying to say anything in terms of like the causal relationship between two phenomena. So, for example, in the case of AI, I guess everyone here has used or is familiarized to some extent with machine learning or like large language models, such as like the models that have been launched by either Google or ChatGPT or Anthropic. So basically, in the case of those models, like the goal of the way they have been trained and created is basically the goal of the method is to predict like the next word in a like it's like a string like text. So basically, in addition to using like, if in the case of the method that you want to that you think it's useful for your research question, you can either you can think of using like, for example, AI. But again, but I feel like because there are like certain things that are I don't know if anyone here has tried to understand or understands how AI works and would like to share his experience with us, or is interested in learning AI. Well, no one. Well, so basically, so basically, it's like, in addition to using econometrics, you can try to use AI. But AI is a field where it's like a field that has been developed like recently, and it's like a very, I would say like of course it's like a very promising field, but it has like any method has like some limitations. So the fact that you're using AI doesn't mean that it's like a perfect method that you can use to either analyze like qualitative or quantitative data.
Hi,
Can you?
Andres.
Yep.
Someone sent a message in the chat about your question, if you would like to address it.
Okay. What is the question? That's Mateo Chirazi, right?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I missed there was another question before. So Samir, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly, but he says, "Hello, I've been working on my mathematics extended essay during this summer, and it has the weight of a research paper on a specific research question. As I use many years, can I use it as an instance for research that on my position?" Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. Like, for example, in my case, when my program right now is a PhD, but the research that I started working on this research when I was finishing, like, or a similar research when I was when I was finishing my bachelor's in law. So it's like back then I was I was doing something very similar when I was trying to determine if where I was trying to characterize existing methods. In the case of the research that I'm trying to pursue, it's one of the challenges is that it's really hard to have access to get access to the information that might be that you need to actually use the method and answer the research question. So when I started working on my method, when I started working, the first time I started working on in this field or like in a similar research question, my goal was aligned to what I'm doing right now, but it was not the same. I was just trying to basically like characterize the methods, and I think like having worked on that research like before has helped me with what I decided to here right now that I now understand how the method works and I have access to the information. So I feel like if I mean like the if you have decided to invest like a lot of time working on if you are interested in the question and you have decided to invest like a lot of your time learning learning new things to address that to answer that research question that might help you're very likely to be able to continue working on that research in the future. I think that's like I guess that happens like very frequently. And Mateo, he just mentioned I use it many times and it works well, but it's refining. So basically, I feel like one of the issues with machine learning, it's like I guess you have heard that when you can query like a large language model, you can basically like ask when you I mean querying is like you can use like a large language model, and even if you ask like the model the same question, the model is very likely that it will return like a different answer. And the thing is, the way like AI works or the way these models are trained, it's basically they're trying to uh, predict, like again, as I said previously, they're trying to predict like the next word or token, or basically like the next word in a text. And these models are not they're not deterministic, which means that basically like this basically what happens when they are trained, it's like and if you provide, for example, like a group, if you provide some text to the large language model, with the model would try to do what is to guess the next word. So it usually you of I don't know if you're familiarized with probability, but basically when probability is basically, yeah, if you're not, well, when 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 the AI is trying to make a guess, and because making that guess involves like determining what is the next word that should be added to that specific string, or to that specific text, that means that basically depending on the language that is being or that was used to for example to query the model, the system would have like distribution of would know like the probability that every possible word in a specific language would be like the next word to that should be added or appended to that text. So basically, again, when you use AI, for example, that's one of the issues. So it's like when you're trying to benchmark or when you're trying to evaluate like the quality of the responses returned by a machine learning system, because the system can every single time, even when you ask like the same query, can return like a different answer. It's kind of hard to assess like the quality of those responses because they might be changing. And also the other issue is like there are like many again, even though of course machine learning and it's being used like very it's basically like there's like a lot of investment and many people believe in like how useful like AI is how useful it is right now and how much more useful it will be like in the future. Um, there are things that like researchers are trying to understand so that they can use AI, so that AI can be used like more properly. Um, so I'm not sure exactly how Mateo has used like this tool and what he means by and basically how he has like assessed like the quality to how he has like for example like proof conducted like some sort of like systematic assessment of the tool, which I think is something like very hard. But yeah, and so can we go to the next slide? And yeah, so basically after using the method, after having defined like your research question, again, like what I would suggest is like finding papers, like usually like of course papers published like in very good research journals. Once you find like once you determine like the research question you want to answer and the like, for example, using that method, which is like, of course, you'll have to read like previous papers that are related to your field or to the question you want to address. And after determining like the research method that you want to use, like if getting that data, either like qualitative or quantitative data, and like analyzing that data, you'll basically have obtained like the information you need for answering like your research question. And that's what you'll be using to basically to make a statement or like to answer your question. So it's like once you have applied the method, you'll be analyzing the results of the method you decided to apply, and those are the results of the method. And after like analyzing those results, you'll have you'll have to basically to conclude and see, for example, how and to what extent, for example, to what extent like the results of the you got from applying like the qualitative and quantitative methods are helpful for analyzing for answering like your question. Also, usually what happens when you do research is like, because the methods themselves, like qualitative and the qualitative and quantitative methods usually have limitations. The fact that you decided to apply like a specific method or a group of methods doesn't mean that those methods necessarily, or that doesn't mean that those methods don't have like any limitations. So it's like, for example, even when you, for example, you're finishing your research and you are supposed, or you have to write your findings, one of the things that you're expected to include is like, for example, how, for example, your data, what were like the limitations regarding to your data. For example, if your data didn't have like some information that could have been helpful for your question, or maybe the data had some errors, that's something that you should include to be like one, like basically like several reasons. You're supposed to be transparent, or you have to be transparent so that other researchers or other people that decide to use or that read your research understand basically what you did and your findings, and also what are the limitations of what you like or your investigation. And yeah, so that's basically from my perspective, very like summarized, like what like doing research usually implies. I feel like um, I mean, of course, you're just starting like this process of like determining what you want to study. Uh, and this is something that I mentioned initially. The reason I decided to do research was because I had like a very specific question that I wanted to answer, and that was pretty much aligned with my background. I don't think that has to be like the case for everybody, but in my case, that is what has worked, which is I had like again this background which I believe aligned with like doing research like in a specific field, and that's why I decided to to basically like apply to the program that I'm pursuing right now, and to invest like all this effort and time trying to become like knowledgeable in my specific field. Um, I don't know if you have any questions or happy to basically clarify um, anything if yeah, if I didn't address it like like during the presentation.
Hi, does anyone have any questions for Andres, Samir, or Mateo? If you want to discuss the question a little more, we're open for questions.
Also,
Um,
Mateo. Yep.
yeah. Mateo, is there any reason why you're not able to unmute yourself, or do you want to ask your
Oh no, I
question?
am able to speak. Sorry.
Okay, okay, all right. So you can address your question directly.
Yeah, so you asked me before like how I assessed OpenAI's deep research, like why I said it needs refining. And I basically based it on specificity. So usually it only focuses on like the first things I give to it, like only the beginning of some data sets. And it doesn't focus on like the rest of the paragraph. And it also usually makes like assumptions about data and it doesn't back them up. And to cover that up, it just gives me a sophisticated paragraph. So if you had like any advice on how to fix that.
Yeah, but I guess yeah. So your question is related to how to. Uh, but again, can you explain what you mean by specificity? Usually focus on.
Yeah, the research, when you use AI to research something, it usually doesn't give something specific. It makes very general assumptions. And if it wants to give something specific, it doesn't have anything to back it up.
Yeah, so I guess you're talking about like how or why like large language models or like in this like yeah LLMs hallucinate. So what happens? It's like because as I mentioned, and of course this is like extremely like general explanation, when the way AI, and I'm not sure if you wanna, if maybe you have done some research on this already, but there's like the math or the technology that is behind AI is something called, or that has been named as transformers. And if you wanna read like the paper that where that used this method for the first time, it's basically, I'm gonna send you like the link. So, but it's basically like the title is "Attention is All You Need." Um, and basically, what the way AI is trained or the it's basically you have like a function that you're trying to minimize, and like the way the function, or mathematically like the way that the goal of the function is to basically like predict the next word in a string. So when you ask like when you query or you use like an AI, a large language model, the system, because the system is trying to guess like the string, or like because based on the string you or your query, the query you provide to the system is trying to guess what is the best way it can complete like the string you provided to the system. The more information you give to the system, the more likely it is that it will return like information that is aligned or is like meaningful based on your query. So let's say, for example, in my case, for example, let's say I used like a large language model. It's like I mean, there's no reason for like like an LLM for to know exactly like what is your specific goal with a question if you don't give like lots of details. It's like you can think of this like as talking to a person. If you ask me a question, but the question is like extremely broad, I won't have like enough information to, I might be able to answer, to give like some like a meaningful or useful response to your question, but that might not happen because the question you're like the query or the question you're asking me is probably like doesn't have like enough information. So for you to basically like lower the probability that the system, or basically like increase the probability that the LLM is going to return something that is meaningful based on your question, you should try to give like as many details as you can, and that is expected to narrow the probable or the likely the possible answers that the system can return, and those answers should be like more helpful or aligned with your actual question. And the other thing you're asking is, and this is another issue which I think, because I feel like there are like so many different like large language models that have been deployed by different companies. It can be kind of I mean, it's not clear if, for example, some companies are using are using this technology differently, but usually what happens is that at least most of the times, like large language models, when you ask like a question, they're not, most of the times, even when they don't know the answer, they don't, they're not capable of, or they don't know that they don't have like enough information to answer that question. So basically what is going to happen is like the system is going to try to make like its best effort to actually like complete, basically to return like the best guess or the best set of, or like the best string or the best test that completes the query that you provided to the system. But and basically, even if that means that the answer that the system is returning is not accurate. So and basically, and that's something that, for example, in the case of legal, where you might be, for example, like there are companies, or even in the case of I mean, I don't know many papers that are more recent regarding this question, but there were like a few papers that were published, like and like papers in the field of legal and AI that were published like at least like 1 year ago, where they were analyzing how good were the responses that were returned by some of the more advanced LLMs, like some of the most advanced LLMs existing back then, and they found that many of them were hallucinating. Basically, like their answers were not accurate based on the question provided by the user. So it's like, I guess this thing that you're asking right now, if you wanna, I mean, I can try to share like more papers that are more recent about this specific topic, but I guess this is something that hasn't been completely addressed by experts in this field.
You.
Sure.
Do we have any more questions for Andres?
I'm gonna
Yes,
add the link.
I have a
Yeah.
question, but from the coming from an advisor's perspective, I don't know if you may help with that. For example, it's relevant to this to the question Samir asked. Um, how much does this play as in terms of accepting these students for the undergraduate studies? I know the research experience and the research proposal for you as a PhD applicant for a program are, of course, most of your application. But for an undergraduate student, now you've been at high school, right? We've been all there. And now, for example, let's look at Stanford since you're there. How much does this play in getting them more likely to get accepted if a student actually does this research that may not translate into a published paper, let's say,
Mhm.
at the undergraduate level? I'm not sure if maybe Yash or maybe you could most likely give some insight. If you were a mentor for these young minds now aspiring to apply to very selective schools in the US.
Well, so basically, for example, a few years ago, I've met. I mean, I guess as far as I understand, and I think this is a very good question. Um, it seems like there's not like a specific criteria that basically guarantees that a person is gonna be admitted to a like a
Yeah.
like a bachelor's degree. But I've met a few cases of people that even though they were still like finishing like their high school, they knew they wanted to pursue like a, or they had like an idea of the program they wanted to pursue, and they decided to, and they had the possibility of joining like a research lab, and I guess they did it because they believed that like at least getting some basic understanding or like or basic experience of like doing some sort of research could help them like be admitted like into one of these universities. But I mean, I'm not completely familiarized with the criteria like this universities used for admitting bachelor students. I feel like if like what I would suggest is like if there's like a student that is very interested like in a specific topic, and basically what that means is like this person is willing to invest like a lot of time learning like getting like a good understanding of that specific field. That's not only going to help the student um, get like a better understanding of the bachelor's that he wants to or she wants to pursue, but also if that might help them like even like I guess there might be cases where they could reach out to professors and see if they would be willing to help them or give them advice, because I feel like that's something that people don't do normally, and if there's someone that is like very young and they're already doing something like this, I guess people usually wants to help. Like professors usually want to help,
Yeah, yeah.
but I don't think there's like a specific like rule or like a set of rules that is gonna that universities necessarily follow.
Yeah. So that's sort of the advantage that the RISE program is providing, you know, in helping these students get some research published and therefore like increasing their chances, bettering their profile when they apply to highly selective schools, especially if they're research based schools, right?
If I may add, I think from what I've seen, it shows that you're not just a good student. It shows that you have curiosity. It shows that you want to take initiative to learn something, and that you're a critical thinker, and you also have the ability to explore beyond your academic curriculum. So I think
Yeah.
it definitely gives an edge. Um, but yeah, I feel like Andres did explain that very well and how it can help in the future as well.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any more questions for Andres? Okay, well, I think we can, one second. Yes, I think there's another question, Andres, in the group chat.
Yeah, if you're doing research as part of the program, like the extended essay, does can you I don't think I'm quite understanding the question. What you mean is like if you could use like the question, like in if you can use like the progress you made for like like to continue doing like research in the same field in the future, or if
If
you're
I,
doing
if I
research,
may, uh, if I may
yeah.
clarify that for you, Andres, the IB program, students who do the International Baccalaureate program, they have something called the extended essay as a requirement in the program itself. So they have to do research and write a 2,000-word research paper. So the question is, does that count as research for the student to submit it as like and if I may here address Samir's question, if we're looking at, as Kushi said, as something outside your curriculum, as something you're interested in, as something you're working on to develop your skills and abilities, then it will not count because it is part of the IB program. It means that you have to do it. It's not up to you whether you're passionate about it or not. It's a part of the program. You will have to do it. But the good thing is you can submit it when you apply later to college. You have the option of submitting your extended essay, especially if you apply to University of Chicago or Harvard or Penn, UPenn. These allow you an optional essay or an optional paper or an optional work you have done to submit it without any word limitations. So for those schools that allow it, you can submit it, or else it will not count as an extra activity you've done and demonstrate your love for research, as we're explaining here, because it's part of the program. IB program, the IB program.
Hmm, there's another. Um, well, you see, Din. I'm probably not pronouncing the name properly, but basically, I feel like I mean, again, I don't have like a I mean, I'm not part of a admissions committee, so I can't say. I mean, I don't have like that specific experience, but one thing I would say is like basically when as a bachelor's, when you're applying for a bachelor's program, it's like the fact that you even if you didn't publish like your specific like the article, that I don't think that's like a requirement for you to be able to use it as a like as an input or like to give to basically like to include this in like in your application so that you can um give like some like more information to the university where you're applying that basically like helps them be sure that you know you have like you're making like some sort of like knowledgeable decision in terms of the program to which like you're applying and that you are like a really good student, like some sort like a responsible person that is willing to work really hard. Because at least from my experience, but I'm not originally from the U.S. In Colombia, uh, you don't necessarily need to do to have like to work to have like a research paper or something like this to finish your batch to finish your to finish high school and because that's not a requirement and you usually don't use it or you don't have to provide that information as part of an application to a bachelor's program. So I think like the fact that you haven't published your research doesn't mean that you cannot use it to as part of your application to a bachelor's degree. Well, I don't know if there are like more questions.
All right, I believe that's it. We don't want to keep you anymore, guys. Thank you so much. If we do have any questions, we'll definitely channel them again to Yash or Kuchi, and maybe have another session to focus on other aspects later on. But thank you so much on this very insightful session into getting to start thinking about research, at least. If not, it's a long journey to actually get there and